Jack Dawson pulls a woman from a sinking car only to discover she's Elena Cruz, the CEO of a $2 billion tech empire. One moment, Jack is battling the raging river to save her life. The next, news vans and cameras swarm his quiet town of Riverbend. But behind Elena's gratitude is a dangerous truth. Someone cut her brakes. As rumors twist their story and paint Jack as a fraud, the rescue that should have been a miracle turns into a fight for their lives. Who's framing them? How far will Jack and Elena have to go to expose the truth before it's too late? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Jack Dawson glanced at the darkening sky through the garage's grimy windows. The wind had picked up, rattling the old metal sign outside his auto shop. Spring storms in Riverbend were no joke, especially with the river already running high from the March thaw. "Maya, honey, we need to wrap it up," he called out to his daughter, who was meticulously organizing socket wrenches by size. "Just 5 more minutes, Dad," Maya replied, her dark curls falling across her face as she concentrated on her task. "I've almost got your toolbox sorted." Jack smiled, watching her work. At 16, Maya had her mother's determination and eye for detail. The thought of Sarah brought the familiar ache to his chest, but these days it came with warm memories too. 4 years since cancer took her, and their daughter was growing into someone who would have made her so proud. Thunder rumbled overhead, and rain began drumming against the roof. "That's our cue," Jack said firmly. "The river road floods fast in weather like this." Maya nodded, quickly finishing her organization and grabbing her backpack. Jack locked up the shop, and they hurried through the increasingly heavy rain to his old pickup truck. The windshield wipers struggled against the downpour as they drove along the winding road that paralleled the swollen river. Maya fiddled with the radio, trying to find a clear signal through the static. "The water's really high," she observed, peering through the passenger window at the churning brown current. Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter, squinting through the rain. "Yeah, this storm's going to—" He broke off suddenly, leaning forward. "What's that?" Through the curtain of rain, headlights wavered erratically on the road ahead. As Jack watched in horror, a car swerved sharply, its tires catching the soft shoulder. In slow motion, the vehicle slid down the embankment toward the angry river. "Maya, call 911!" Jack commanded, pulling over and throwing the truck into park. He grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight from under his seat and a tire iron from his toolbox. "Dad, be careful!" Maya's voice was tight with fear as she fumbled for her phone. Jack was already running through the rain. The car had hit the water nose first and was rapidly being pulled into deeper water by the current. He could see someone moving inside. Without hesitation, he waded in. The icy water immediately soaked through his work boots and jeans, threatening to knock him off his feet. The current tugged at his legs as he fought his way toward the sinking vehicle. Water was already halfway up the car's windows. Inside, a woman in business attire was struggling with her seatbelt, clutching a briefcase to her chest. Their eyes met through the glass, and Jack saw raw fear in her face. The passenger side was closer to the bank. Jack raised the tire iron and shouted, "Cover your face!" He brought the tool down hard on the window. The safety glass spider-webbed but held. He struck again, and this time it shattered. Cold river water rushed in as Jack reached through the broken window. The woman had managed to free her seatbelt, but was clearly dazed. "Give me your hand!" he yelled over the roar of the river. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength, still holding the briefcase. Jack braced his feet against the river bottom and pulled. For a terrifying moment, she seemed stuck, but then she came free through the window in a rush. The current instantly tried to sweep them both away. Jack wrapped one arm around her waist and used the other to fight against the flow, half dragging, half carrying her toward the bank. His boots kept losing their grip on the slick river bottom. Maya's voice carried from above. "They're coming, Dad! Hold on!" Jack's muscles burned with the effort, but he could hear sirens approaching. The woman was conscious but barely helping, her head lolling against his shoulder. Step by agonizing step, he pushed through the current until finally his feet found firmer ground. Maya scrambled down the bank to help, and together they managed to get the woman onto level ground. Behind them, there was a gurgling sound, as the car disappeared completely beneath the dark water. Red and blue lights strobed through the rain as an ambulance and police cruiser pulled up. Paramedics rushed down with a stretcher and medical gear. Jack stood back, breathing hard, as they worked on the woman. Someone draped a blanket over his shoulders, but he barely noticed, his eyes fixed on the pale face of the person he'd just pulled from the river. She was still clutching that briefcase like it was a lifeline. The paramedics efficiently transferred her to the stretcher. As they carried her up to the ambulance, Jack wrapped the blanket tighter around himself and watched the emergency vehicle's taillights disappear into the stormy night. Maya pressed against his side, shivering. "Dad, that was... you just..." She couldn't seem to find the words. Jack put his arm around her shoulders, suddenly bone-tired. "Let's get home and dry it off," he said quietly. "Been enough excitement for one night." The morning sun struggled to break through lingering storm clouds as Jack's pickup rumbled down Main Street. His muscles ached from last night's rescue, but years of Army training had taught him to push through discomfort. Maya sat beside him, fingers flying over her phone's keyboard. "The internet's going crazy about last night," she said, scrolling through news feeds. "But nobody knows who you are yet." "Good," Jack replied, turning onto the road toward Riverbend High. "Less complicated that way." The radio played softly in the background, mostly commercials and weather updates. Then a news bulletin cut through. "Breaking news this morning. Elena Cruz, CEO of technology giant Novabridge, was rescued from a near-fatal car accident last night in Riverbend, Ohio." Cruz, whose company is valued at over $2 billion, was pulled from her sinking vehicle by an unidentified local man. Novabridge representatives confirm Cruz is in stable condition. Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Maya's eyes went wide. "Dad," she exclaimed. "You saved Elena Cruz. Do you know who she is?" Novabridge makes the processors in basically everything. They're revolutionizing cloud computing and AI hardware. We studied her in computer science class. Jack shook his head, still processing. Just knew someone needed help. Didn't exactly check her business card while the car was sinking. Maya was already pulling up articles on her phone. "She's brilliant, Dad. Started coding when she was my age, built Novabridge from nothing. And she's Cuban-American. There aren't many women of color running major tech companies." She paused, looking thoughtful. "Wonder what she was doing in Riverbend." They pulled up to the school, where students were already gathering in clusters, phones out, obviously discussing the news. Jack noticed a few curious glances toward his truck. "Maya," he said quietly, "let's keep this low-key for now, okay? Don't need the attention." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I know, Dad." She gathered her backpack and opened the door, then turned back. "But what you did, it was pretty amazing." Jack watched her join the stream of students heading into the building, then drove to his shop. He'd barely unlocked the front door when the first news van pulled up. "Mr. Dawson?" A reporter jumped out, microphone ready. "We'd like to ask you about last night's rescue of Elena Cruz." More vehicles were arriving, local stations, even some national outlets. Jack held up his hands. "Sorry, folks, no comment. Got work to do." He retreated inside, letting the phone ring to voicemail as reporters tried that angle instead. Through the morning, he focused on oil changes and brake jobs, normal routine work that helped settle his mind. A few regular customers mentioned the rescue, but they knew him well enough to respect his privacy. The afternoon sun was slanting through the garage doors when a sleek black car pulled up. Jack wiped his hands on a shop rag as a woman stepped out, the same one he'd pulled from the river, though now dressed in crisp business casual instead of soaked formal wear. Elena Cruz moved carefully, obviously still feeling the effects of the accident, but her posture was straight, her expression composed. She walked into the shop like someone used to commanding boardrooms. "Mr. Dawson," she said, extending her hand. "I believe I owe you my life." Her handshake was firm, her dark eyes direct. Up close, Jack could see the fading bruise on her temple, the way she held herself slightly rigid against pain. "Just glad I could help, Miss Cruz," he replied simply. "How are you feeling?" "Better, thanks to you." She glanced around the shop, taking in the neat organization, the worn but well-maintained equipment. "I wanted to thank you personally, away from the media circus." Before Jack could respond, the back door opened, and Maya burst in, stopping short when she saw their visitor. "Oh, Ms. Cruz, I'm Maya, Jack's daughter. I can't believe you're actually here." Her enthusiasm made Elena smile. "Maya's our resident tech expert," Jack explained with quiet pride. "Keeps our ancient computer system running somehow." "Dad," Maya protested, "it's not ancient, it's vintage. And I've got it running Linux now, which is way better for the mesh network project." Elena's eyebrows rose with interest. "Mesh network?" Maya's face lit up. "For the seniors in town. A lot of them can't afford good internet, and some are homebound. I'm trying to set up a community Wi-Fi network so they can access telehealth services and stay connected. It's just, parts are expensive." Jack watched as Elena moved to Maya's workstation, where a battered laptop displayed complex networking diagrams. The CEO studied the screen with professional interest. "This is impressive work," Elena said, genuine respect in her voice. "You taught yourself network engineering?" "YouTube and free online courses," Maya admitted. "The hardware's mostly salvaged or donated. It's not much, but you're making a real difference," Elena finished. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "I'd like to help. Send a list of what you need to this email, parts, equipment, whatever will make this work properly. No strings attached." Maya's eyes went huge. "Really? That would be. Thank you." Elena turned back to Jack. "Thank you again, Mr. Dawson, for everything." She headed for her car, then paused. "You know, the world needs more people who just stop to help without asking who's in the car." After she left, the shop felt different somehow, like a breath of fresh air had blown through. Maya couldn't stop smiling as she worked on her parts list. That evening, Jack grilled chicken, while Maya set their small kitchen table. The house still held traces of Sarah, photos on the walls, her favorite curtains in the windows, but it felt warm rather than sad these days. "Still can't believe Elena Cruz was in our shop," Maya said, putting out plates. "Did you see her looking at the network diagrams? She actually understood what I was trying to do." Jack smiled, bringing the chicken to the table. "Pretty surreal day all around. Famous CEO, news vans, not our usual Tuesday in Riverbend. The reporters finally leave you alone?" "Mostly. Sheriff Briggs helped run interference." Jack served the chicken, then sat down. "How are you doing with all this attention?" Maya considered while adding salad to her plate. "It's weird, but good weird, you know? Like maybe something big is happening in our little town." "Maybe so," Jack agreed, though his tone was measured. "Just remember what matters hasn't changed. We are who we are." They ate together, talking about Maya's classes and the cars Jack needed to finish tomorrow, while outside their windows, Riverbend settled into its usual quiet evening rhythm. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the open garage doors as Jack worked under the hood of Mrs. Peterson's ancient Buick. The familiar sense of motor oil and metal surrounded him, a comfort zone where he knew exactly what he was doing. 2 days had passed since the rescue, and the media frenzy had finally started to die down. He heard footsteps approaching and straightened up, expecting another customer. Instead, he found Elena Cruz standing there in jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Without her business attire, she looked different, more approachable, though still carrying herself with that natural grace he'd noticed before. "Ms. Cruz," he said, wiping his hands on a shop rag, "wasn't expecting to see you again." She smiled, glancing around to make sure no one had noticed her arrival. "Please call me Elena. I thought the casual outfit might help me blend in better. The media attention can be overwhelming." Jack nodded understanding. Tell me about it. Though they seem to be moving on to other stories now. Thank goodness. I wanted to learn more about Riverbend, Elena said, moving deeper into the shop. I've driven through small towns like this before, but never really stopped to look around. There's history here. Lot of history, Jack agreed. He gestured toward the wall where various signs and memorabilia hung. That factory logo up there? Heart of this town for nearly 70 years. Riverbend Manufacturing. Made everything from machine parts to household appliances. Employed half the town at one point. Elena's steps faltered as her eyes fixed on the old metal sign. The red and black logo, though faded, was still clearly visible, a stylized RM within a gear wheel. Her face went completely still, like someone who'd just seen a ghost. When did it close? She asked, her voice carefully controlled. About 15 years ago. Company got bought out. Operations moved overseas. Jack shook his head. Town's never really recovered. Lot of good people lost their jobs. Skilled workers, machinists, engineers, quality control specialists. Elena stood motionless, still staring at the logo. Her hands had tightened into fists at her sides, though Jack doubted she realized it. Whatever was going through her mind, it seemed deeply personal. The tension was broken by Maya bursting through the back door, laptop under her arm. Elena, Dad said you were here. Want to see the mesh network? We've got the first test node running. Elena seemed to shake herself out of whatever memory had gripped her. I'd love to, she said, turning toward Maya with visible relief. Show me what you've built. Maya led them to her workstation, where a complicated arrangement of networking equipment was set up. Despite her earlier distraction, Elena listened intently as Maya explained the system. See, we're using recycled routers with custom firmware, Maya demonstrated, pointing to various components. Each node creates a wireless bridge to the next one. Once we get enough nodes up, we can share internet access across whole neighborhoods. The coverage maps look good, Elena noted, studying Maya's laptop screen, but you'll need weather-resistant enclosures for the outdoor units. That's one of the problems, Maya admitted. Plus, getting enough height for good line of sight between nodes and convincing people to host the equipment. I might be able to help with that last part, Elena said. Sometimes it just takes showing people how technology can make their lives better. What if we did some installations together? I could work with you, house by house, teaching seniors how to use the network. Maya's eyes lit up. Really? That would be amazing. Mrs. Johnson next door already said we could put equipment on her porch. She wants to video chat with her grandkids. Perfect place to start. Elena smiled. We can document everything, create a template for expanding the network. This could become a model for other small towns. Jack watched their interaction with quiet satisfaction. Despite their different backgrounds, Elena spoke to Maya as an equal, taking her ideas seriously. It was good to see his daughter's talents being recognized. I need to head back to my hotel, Elena said finally, checking her phone. But I'll have those parts shipped here tomorrow, Maya. And we'll start the installations this weekend? Absolutely. Maya beamed. I'll make a list of potential host houses and start talking to people. After Elena left, Jack pulled Maya into a one-armed hug. Pretty exciting stuff, kiddo. Just don't let it interfere with your schoolwork, okay? Dad? Maya rolled her eyes affectionately. When have I ever let that happen? Later that evening, in her hotel room, Elena sat cross-legged on the bed, an old photograph spread on the comforter before her. The picture showed a younger Victor Cruz standing proudly in front of Riverbend Manufacturing, wearing work clothes and a cautious smile. Her father, the skilled machinist who'd taught her the value of precision, of doing things right the first time. The same father she hadn't spoken to in years. She traced the factory logo in the background of the photo, identical to the one hanging in Jack's shop. The sight of it had hit her like a physical blow. All the old pain came flooding back, her father's quiet dignity as he was passed over for promotion after promotion, the whispered comments from other workers, the final humiliation that drove him to quit. Elena had left Riverbend soon after, determined to build something of her own, something no one could take away. She'd succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, except now, fate had brought her back to the very place she'd fled from. The photo blurred as tears threatened. She blinked them back, remembering instead Jack's immediate courage in the storm, Maya's brilliant determination to help others, the warmth of their welcome despite not knowing who she was. Perhaps Riverbend had changed. Or perhaps it had always contained both darkness and light, like any place where human beings struggled and hoped and tried to build better lives. She stared at her father's face in the photograph, seeing now how young he'd been, how much weight he'd carried. The same factory that had hurt him had also given him pride in his work, a way to provide for his family. Nothing was ever simple. Elena placed the photo carefully on the nightstand. Tomorrow would bring decisions about how much of her past to reveal, but for tonight she let herself feel both the old wounds and the new gratitude, knowing both were equally real. Sheriff Walt Briggs's cruiser pulled into Jack's auto shop just after opening time. The morning sun caught his badge as he stepped out, his weathered face serious. Jack recognized that expression. It meant trouble. "Morning, Jack," the sheriff said, removing his hat as he entered the garage. "Got a minute?" Jack set down his wrench and wiped his hands. "Sure, Walt. What brings you by?" The sheriff glanced around, making sure they were alone. "It's about the accident with Ms. Cruz. Our investigation turned up something concerning." He pulled out his notepad. The brake line on her car was damaged, and not from the crash. "Looks deliberate." Jack's stomach tightened. "You're saying someone tampered with her brakes?" "That's what the evidence suggests. Clean cut, probably made while the car was parked." Walt's eyes narrowed. "Someone wanted that car to fail, Jack, and they picked their spot, that curve by the river, during a storm." Before Jack could respond, a news van screeched into the parking lot. 3 more followed close behind, reporters and cameramen spilling out. "Not again," Jack muttered. The reporters swarmed toward the shop entrance, microphones extended. A familiar face from the local news station pushed to the front. "Mr. Dawson, sources suggest your heroic rescue might have been staged. Care to comment?" "What?" Jack stared in disbelief. Another reporter jumped in. "Did you have prior contact with Elena Cruz? Was this a publicity stunt for Nova Bridge?" Sheriff Briggs stepped between Jack and the press. "This is private property, folks. Back up to the sidewalk." Jack's phone buzzed a text from Maya at school. "Dad, people are saying weird things online about you and Elena. You okay?" He typed back quickly, "I'm fine. Don't worry. Focus on class." Across town at the Riverbend Inn, Elena's morning was unraveling just as dramatically. Her phone lit up with an urgent message from her executive assistant. "Emergency board meeting called. Greg Hanlon, requesting immediate video conference." Elena set up her laptop in her hotel room, straightening her jacket before joining the video call. The faces of her board members filled the screen, with CFO Greg Hanlon front and center. "Elena," Greg began, his tone carefully concerned. "The board has serious questions about recent events." "I'm listening," Elena said coolly. "Your near-fatal accident, this extended stay in a small town, your emotional involvement with your rescuer, it all suggests instability, especially coming so soon after your health scare last year." Elena's jaw tightened. "I'm perfectly fit to lead this company, Greg. My doctors cleared me months ago." "Nevertheless," Greg pressed, "the board needs reassurance. Our stock has dropped 3 points since the accident. Rumors are circulating about your judgment. Rumors you seem suspiciously well informed about," Elena noted. Greg's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm simply doing my job protecting the company's interests. Perhaps it's time to consider a temporary step back?" "Not happening," Elena said firmly. "Now if there's nothing else?" The call ended, but Elena's unease remained. Greg had been gunning for her position for months. This crisis was giving him ammunition. Her phone buzzed with texts about the allegations against Jack. Her heart sank as she read them. Someone was working very hard to discredit them both. By evening, Elena needed to clear her head. She texted Jack, "Can we meet? Somewhere quiet?" They agreed on May's Diner, a small place on the edge of town. At this hour, it was nearly empty. Elena slid into a booth across from Jack, both of them looking worn from the day's events. "Coffee?" the waitress asked. "Please," they said in unison. When they were alone, Elena spoke first. "I'm so sorry about the media circus. Someone's trying to spin this against us both." "Yeah, figured that out," Jack said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Sheriff says your brake line was cut." Elena's hand trembled slightly as she set down her cup. "I suspected something like that. Jack, I think I'm in danger." "Real danger." "From who?" "My CFO, Greg Hanlon for one. He's been trying to force me out for months. Today he called an emergency board meeting, questioning my fitness to lead." She laughed bitterly. "Convenient timing, don't you think?" Jack studied her face. Despite her composed exterior, he could see fear in her eyes. "What do you need?" "I need to prove Greg's involvement, if he is behind this. But mainly, I need somewhere safe to think, to plan my next move." She hesitated. "The hotel feels exposed." "Stay at my place," Jack offered without hesitation. "We have a spare room. Maya would love it, and no one would think to look for you there." "I couldn't impose, Elena." Jack's voice was gentle but firm. "You're not imposing, and I promise you'll be safe with us." Their eyes met across the table. Elena saw nothing but sincerity in Jack's steady gaze, and something in her chest loosened slightly. For the first time all day, she felt like she could breathe. "Thank you," she said softly. "I might take you up on that." The morning sun painted Riverbend streets in soft golden light as Elena packed a small bag at her hotel. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from the office, but she silenced it. For now, she had more important work to do. Jack's red pickup truck waited in the parking lot, Maya bouncing excitedly in the passenger seat. They had mapped out their day, installing Wi-Fi nodes at 5 seniors' homes, starting with Mrs. Peterson on Maple Street. "You sure about this?" Jack asked as Elena climbed in beside Maya. "Won't your board mind you doing manual labor?" Elena smiled, adjusting her baseball cap. "What the board doesn't know won't hurt them. Besides, I started in tech support. It'll be nice to get my hands dirty again." Maya held up her tablet, showing a map of Riverbend dotted with red markers. "Each dot is a senior who signed up for our mesh network. Mrs. Peterson's been waiting forever for reliable internet to video chat with her grandkids." They pulled up to a small white house with perfectly tended flower beds. Mrs. Peterson, a tiny woman with snow-white hair, waited on her porch swing. "Jack Dawson, you're late," she called out, but her eyes twinkled. "And who's this young lady with you?" "This is Elena," Jack said simply. "She's helping with the Wi-Fi setup." Mrs. Peterson squinted at Elena. "You look familiar, dear. Have we met?" "No, ma'am," Elena replied, shouldering a tool bag. "Just passing through town, trying to help out." Inside, Maya walked Mrs. Peterson through the basics, while Jack and Elena installed the equipment. The old woman insisted on feeding them, producing a fresh-baked apple pie that filled the house with cinnamon warmth. "My Henry loved this recipe," Mrs. Peterson said softly, watching them eat. "Before he passed, we'd video chat with the great-grandchildren every Sunday, but then the internet got spotty." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Elena reached over and squeezed her hand. "We'll have you connected again by dinner time. Promise." The next house belonged to Mr. Rodriguez, a retired postal worker who greeted them with coffee and stories about delivering mail in snowstorms. At the third house, sisters Betty and Jean Miller fussed over Jack like surrogate mothers, pinching his cheeks and asking if he was eating enough. "You're too skinny," Betty declared, pushing a container of cookies into his hands. "And this lovely Elena needs feeding too, so pale." "Working too hard, I bet." Elena caught Jack's eye and had to stifle a laugh. It felt strange being mothered, strange, but wonderful. By late afternoon, they'd finished all 5 installations. Maya demonstrated the video chat feature for each senior, their faces lighting up as grainy images of distant family members appeared on their screens. "Last stop," Jack announced, pulling up to Riverbend Community Church. "Pastor Ruth wants to check the signal strength." The old brick church stood sentinel over Main Street, its white steeple reaching toward the darkening sky. Pastor Ruth met them at the door, her warm smile crinkling the corners of her eyes. "Perfect timing," she said. "We're having hymn night. You'll stay, won't you?" Elena started to decline, but Maya grabbed her hand. "Please? The acoustics are amazing in here." The sanctuary glowed with soft lamplight as people filtered in. Elena sat between Jack and Maya in a back pew, feeling oddly nervous. She hadn't been to church since. She couldn't remember when. The music started softly, just piano and voices at first. Then more voices joined in, harmony rising to the rafters. Elena didn't know the words, but the peace in the room wrapped around her like a warm blanket. She glanced at Jack, who sang quietly, his deep voice steady and sure. In the gentle light, she saw past his usual reserved expression to something deeper, a quiet strength, a solid faith that anchored him through loss and hardship. The final hymn ended, its last notes floating in the stillness. People lingered, chatting in low voices, but Jack and Elena sat in comfortable silence. "Thank you," Elena whispered finally, "for letting me be part of this." Jack turned to her, his eyes soft. "You're welcome here, Elena. You know that, right?" On the drive back to Jack's house, Elena watched Riverbend streets slip past in the growing dusk. Porch lights winked on, and through windows she glimpsed families gathering for dinner. "I can't remember the last time I felt this connected to people," she admitted. "In my world, it's all boardrooms and business deals. This is different." Jack glanced at her, noting the slight catch in her voice. "Different good?" "Different wonderful." Elena smiled, but something flickered behind her eyes, a shadow of uncertainty or unspoken truth. "I'd forgotten what it feels like to just help. To make someone's day better in a small way." Jack sensed there was more she wanted to say, but he didn't push. The truck rolled to a stop in his driveway, and Maya hopped out, already talking about tomorrow's installations. Elena watched her bound up the porch steps, then turned to Jack with genuine warmth in her smile. "Thank you for today. All of it." But as she followed Maya inside, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that Elena was holding something back, something that weighed heavily on her heart. Maya sat cross-legged on Jack's living room floor, her laptop balanced on her knees. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows as her fingers flew across the keyboard. She'd been curious about Elena's car ever since the crash, and now she had a chance to look deeper. "Dad, come look at this," Maya called out, her forehead creasing with concern. Jack set down his coffee mug and settled beside her on the carpet. The screen displayed lines of data that meant nothing to him, but Maya pointed to specific entries with growing excitement. "See these timestamps? They're from the night of the crash. Someone accessed Elena's car systems remotely through the aftermarket service module." Maya's voice trembled slightly. "The brake control unit was definitely tampered with." Jack leaned closer, squinting at the screen. "Are you sure? How did you even get this information?" "Elena gave me access to run diagnostics, remember? She wanted to make sure the car was safe before driving it again." Maya pulled up another window. "Look here. These access logs came from an IP address registered to TechServe Solutions." The front door opened, and Elena stepped in, shaking rain from her umbrella. She'd been spending more time at the Dawson's house lately, helping with the community Wi-Fi project. One look at their faces told her something was wrong. "What is it?" she asked, setting down her bag. Maya turned the laptop so Elena could see. "Someone hacked your car the night of the crash, through TechServe Solutions." Elena's face went pale. "TechServe? That's impossible. They're not our authorized service provider. But they are connected to NovaBridge, Maya said, pulling up corporate registration documents, through a shell company called Horizon Ventures. Jack watched as Elena's expression shifted from confusion to dawning realization. "Greg," she whispered, "Horizon Ventures is one of his pet projects. He tried to get board approval for TechServe as our service provider last year, but I blocked it." "We need to take this to the police," Jack said firmly. Elena shook her head. "We can't. Not yet." She sank onto the couch, running her hands through her hair. "The board is already questioning my leadership. If this gets out now, Greg will spin it as another example of my instability. He'll say I'm making accusations without proof to cover my own mistakes." "But we have proof," Maya protested, gesturing at her laptop. "Digital records can be altered or explained away," Elena said. "Greg's too smart to leave an obvious trail. We need more than circumstantial evidence." Jack paced the room, his military training kicking in. "Okay, let's think this through. Maya, can you track other instances of unauthorized access?" Maya nodded, already typing. "I can set up alerts for any new attempts, and I can dig deeper into TechServe's connection to Horizon Ventures." "Be careful," Elena warned. "Greg has resources. If he realizes we're investigating, we'll be discreet," Jack assured her. He sat next to Elena on the couch, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You're not alone in this anymore." They spent the next few hours planning. Maya created secure channels for sharing information, while Jack mapped out potential weak points in Greg's facade. Elena provided details about Greg's past projects and business connections, looking for patterns they could exploit. As evening approached, thunder rumbled in the distance. Elena stood reluctantly, knowing she needed to return to her hotel. "I have a board meeting tomorrow morning. I'll have to act normal, like I don't know any of this." "You can do it," Jack said softly. "You're stronger than Greg knows." Maya hugged Elena fiercely. "We've got your back. Nobody messes with our family." Elena's eyes glistened at the word family, but she quickly blinked away the emotion. "Thank you both. I don't know what I'd do without you." After Elena left, Jack and Maya secured their findings and backed up the data to encrypted drives. The storm grew closer, lightning illuminating the darkening sky. "Dad?" Maya paused at the foot of the stairs. "We're going to fix this, right? Elena doesn't deserve what Greg's doing to her." Jack pulled his daughter into a hug. "We'll figure it out, sweetheart. Now get some sleep." But sleep proved elusive for Jack. He lay in bed, listening to the rain pound against the windows, his mind churning with worry. Elena's safety, the town's hopes for revival through her help, Maya's determination to expose the truth, it all weighed heavily on his heart. The storm raged outside, eerily similar to the night he'd pulled Elena from the river. Only now he knew it hadn't been an accident. Someone had deliberately tried to harm her, and they might try again. Thunder crashed overhead as Jack stared at the ceiling, the sound of rain matching his restless thoughts. Somewhere in town, Elena was probably lying awake too, carrying the burden of tomorrow's board meeting and the knowledge that her trusted CFO had tried to kill her. The morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of Riverbend's church hall, casting colorful patterns across the worn wooden floor. People filed in, filling the metal folding chairs that had been arranged in neat rows. Jack stood near the back, watching Elena at the podium as she adjusted the microphone. Maya sat in the front row, practically bouncing with contained excitement. Pastor Ruth moved through the crowd, greeting everyone with warm smiles. The hall hummed with curious whispers. Word had spread that Elena Cruz had called this meeting to make an important announcement about Riverbend's future. Elena wore a simple blue dress. Her usual corporate polish softened to match the setting. She cleared her throat, and the room fell silent. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming." Her voice carried clearly through the hall. "I've spent the past week getting to know your community, and I've been deeply moved by your spirit, your resilience, and your dedication to helping one another. she gestured to Maya. I've seen teenagers teaching seniors how to video chat with their grandchildren. I've watched neighbors helping neighbors install wireless networks so homebound veterans can access medical care. This is a community that doesn't give up on its people. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Elena's eyes found Jack's, and she smiled. That's why I'm here to announce that Nova Bridge is launching the Riverbend Innovation Pilot. We're going to renovate and reopen the old manufacturing plant, not for traditional manufacturing, but as a technology refurbishment and training center. Gasps and excited whispers filled the room. Elena held up her hands, continuing, "This facility will provide job training for late career workers and veterans, teaching them how to repair and refurbish technology equipment. And I'm pleased to announce that Jack Dawson has agreed to serve as the center's director." All heads turned toward Jack, who felt his face flush. Elena went on. "Additionally, we're establishing the Sarah Dawson Youth Coding Fellowship, named in honor of Jack's late wife, which will be led by Maya Dawson." Maya's eyes welled with tears at the mention of her mother's name. Pastor Ruth squeezed her shoulder gently. "This is more than just a business venture," Elena said, her voice softening. "It's about recognizing that experience matters, that it's never too late to learn new skills, and that sometimes the best way forward is to bridge the old with the new." The announcement sparked a flurry of questions. Elena answered each one patiently, explaining how the program would work, the timeline for renovation, and the application process for both the training program and the youth fellowship. After the meeting, the church hall buzzed with excitement. People gathered in small groups, discussing the possibilities. Some older factory workers who'd lost their jobs years ago were already talking about applying for the training program. Elena slipped away from the crowd, making her way through Riverbend's quiet streets to a modest apartment building. Her heart pounded as she climbed the stairs to the third floor. She hadn't been here in years, but she remembered the way. She knocked on apartment 3C. After a moment, Victor Cruz opened the door. Her father had aged, his hair now completely silver, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "Elena?" He seemed startled, despite having received her call earlier. "Hello, Papa," she shifted nervously. "May I come in?" He stepped back, gesturing her inside. The apartment was small but immaculate, with family photos on the walls, including some of her as a child. She noticed he'd kept them up all these years. They sat at his small kitchen table, where a pot of Cuban coffee already waited. He poured 2 cups in silence. "I heard about the accident," he finally said, "and about the man who saved you." Elena wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "Jack Dawson. He's a good man. Like your mother's father, a mechanic who could fix anything." Victor's voice held a hint of approval. "Papa, we're reopening the plant. Not for manufacturing, but for technology training." She explained the project, watching his expression carefully. Would you consider visiting when it opens? Maybe share some stories about the old days?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. "You know why I left that place?" "I know. Things were different then. Bad." Elena reached across the table, touching his hand. "But we can make it better now. Help make sure those same mistakes aren't repeated." He looked at their joined hands, then met her eyes. "Perhaps," he said softly, "perhaps it is time." That evening, the town fair was in full swing. String lights crisscrossed overhead, casting a warm glow over the festivities. The smell of cotton candy and grilled corn filled the air, and children darted between game booths clutching prizes. Elena found Jack near the dance floor, where couples swayed to a local band playing slow country songs. He wore jeans and a pressed shirt, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "Quite a day," he said as she approached. "Thank you for agreeing to direct the center," she replied. "I couldn't think of anyone better." The band started playing "I Can't Help Falling in Love," and Jack held out his hand. "May I have this dance?" Elena slipped into his arms, and they began to move slowly to the music. His hand was warm against her back, steady and sure. Neither spoke for a while, just moving together under the twinkling lights. Maya was touched by the fellowship name, Jack said quietly. Sarah would be proud of her, Elena responded. Maya told me how her mother always encouraged her interest in computers. They turned slowly, and Elena caught glimpses of familiar faces in the crowd. Pastor Ruth watching with a knowing smile, Maya recording the moment on her phone, even her father standing at the edge of the fair, having accepted her invitation to come. The song continued, and Jack held her a little closer. Elena rested her head against his shoulder, allowing herself to feel the simple joy of the moment. Here, under the string lights with fireflies dancing in the summer evening, she felt more at home than she had in years. The morning sun had barely risen over Riverbend when Jack's phone started buzzing incessantly. Text messages, voicemails, and news alerts flooded in. He rubbed his eyes, trying to make sense of the headlines flashing across his screen. Staged rescue? Tech CEO's river drama called into question. Leaked footage shows suspicious activity before cruise accident, small-town hero, or calculated scam. His hands trembled as he clicked on one of the videos. The footage was grainy, apparently from a security camera near the river. It showed his truck parked suspiciously close to where Elena's car would later go off the road. The timestamp had been manipulated to make it appear he'd been waiting there before the accident. "Dad?" Maya stood in his doorway, her face pale. She held up her phone. "It's all over social media. They're saying terrible things about us." Jack's heart sank as he scrolled through more headlines. Another video showed him at his shop, talking to Elena days before the accident, except the footage had been edited, making their conversation look secretive and suspicious. The local news was running with an even more damaging angle. Sources claim NovaBridge CEO Elena Cruz fast-tracked contracts for Dawson Auto Shop weeks before rescue incident. The contracts they referenced were simply the parts Elena had donated for Maya's community Wi-Fi project, but the story twisted it into something sinister. His shop phone started ringing. When he answered, a reporter's voice barked questions. "Mr. Dawson, care to comment on allegations that you orchestrated Elena Cruz's accident for financial gain?" Jack hung up, his hands shaking. He called Elena, but it went straight to voicemail. Maya sat at the kitchen table, staring at her phone with tears in her eyes. "Someone posted our address in a comment thread. They're calling us scammers, saying we took advantage of Ms. Cruz." Jack gently took the phone from her hands. "Don't read that stuff, honey. We know the truth." But the truth seemed to matter little as the morning wore on. Pastor Ruth called to warn him that even some church members were asking questions. The sheriff left a message saying he needed to review some details about the rescue. Around noon, Elena finally called. Her voice was strained. "The board just suspended me pending investigation." Greg Hanlon presented the footage at an emergency meeting, along with documents suggesting I violated corporate governance by approving resources for your shop. "But that's ridiculous," Jack protested. "We have proof. The accident was sabotage. My lawyers say we can't go public with that yet. Not without more evidence. The board has frozen all new projects, including the Riverbend pilot." Jack could hear the pain in her voice. "Elena, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. This isn't your fault. Greg's behind all of it. I'm sure of it. But right now, my legal team says we both need to lay low and avoid public statements." After hanging up, Jack drove to his shop, only to find someone had spray-painted fraud across the garage door. Inside, his voicemail was full of canceled appointments. Longtime customers wanted nothing to do with him. At lunch, he stopped by the diner where he'd eaten breakfast every Saturday for years. Conversations hushed as he entered. The waitress, who usually called him on, barely made eye contact as she took his order. Two regulars at the counter, men he'd done free oil changes for when times were tough, whispered loudly enough for him to hear, always knew there was something off about him, acting all humble while playing big city games. Probably planned it with that CEO woman from the start. These corporate types, They think they can buy anyone. Jack left his food untouched and drove home. Maya was curled up on the couch, her laptop closed beside her. "I had to shut down my social media," she said quietly. "Kids at school, they're sharing memes about us. Calling you a con man. Saying I only got the fellowship because we tricked Ms. Cruz." Jack sat beside her, pulling her close. "We know what really happened that night. God knows the truth." But even as he said it, he felt his faith wavering. He'd always believed in the basic goodness of people, in the strength of community. Now that same community was turning on them based on nothing but doctored videos and twisted facts. The phone rang again, another reporter. Jack unplugged it. As evening fell, they sat at the kitchen table picking at microwaved leftovers. Neither had the energy to cook. The only sound was the steady hum of the refrigerator, a mechanical drone that seemed to mock the silence where their hopes had lived just yesterday. Maya pushed her peas around her plate. "Dad? What's going to happen to all the seniors counting on our Wi-Fi project, and the veterans who were going to train at the center?" Jack had no answer. He thought of Elena, fighting for her career. He thought of the elders who'd welcomed them onto their porches, of the excitement in their eyes when they first video chatted with faraway grandchildren. He thought of Pastor Ruth's words about community and faith. But tonight, those memories felt distant, washed away by a flood of suspicion and whispers. The kitchen silence pressed in around them like a heavy blanket, smothering the joy they'd felt just 24 hours ago at the town fair. Maya's untouched dinner grew cold. Jack's coffee sat forgotten, black and bitter in his cup. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating their walls before plunging them back into shadow. The refrigerator hummed on, its steady drone the only voice in a house that had, just yesterday, been full of laughter and dreams. 2 days after the smear campaign broke, Jack's auto shop stood quiet. He'd stopped answering the phone. The few loyal customers who still came by found the doors locked, a hastily scrawled "closed for maintenance" sign taped to the window. At home, Jack sat at his kitchen table, staring at a half-empty coffee mug. The local newspaper lay unopened beside him. He couldn't bear to see what new accusations might be printed there. The silence in the house felt heavy, broken only by the gentle ticking of the wall clock his late wife had loved so much. A soft knock at the door made him tense. These days, every unexpected visitor could be another reporter looking for a, quote, another former friend with accusations in their eyes. He considered not answering, but through the window he recognized Pastor Ruth's familiar silhouette. "I brought some of my famous banana bread," she said when he opened the door, holding up a foil-wrapped loaf. "And don't you dare tell me you're not hungry." Despite himself, Jack felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Pastor Ruth had that effect on people. Her no-nonsense warmth could crack even the hardest shells of despair. She settled at the kitchen table, cutting thick slices of bread while Jack made fresh coffee. "You've been hiding," she said. Not a question, but a gentle observation. "Elena's lawyers said it's best if we lay low, avoid making statements," Jack replied, his voice rough from disuse. "And honestly, I'm tired of the looks I get in town." Pastor Ruth took a contemplative bite of banana bread. "You know, there's a difference between being quiet and being silent, between laying low and letting your light go out." "My light?" Jack scoffed. "Pastor, they've turned me into the villain of Riverbend. Half the town thinks I'm a con man. Half the town thought David was just a shepherd boy," she countered, reaching across to pat his hand. "You don't dim your light because a storm rolls in. You lift it higher." "I wish I had your faith," Jack mumbled. "Oh, this isn't about faith," Pastor Ruth said, surprising him. "This is about truth. And truth, like light, has a way of breaking through the darkest clouds, but only if we keep it burning." While they talked, Maya had been quiet in her room, but now she emerged with her laptop clutched to her chest, her eyes bright with purpose. "Dad," she said, "Pastor Ruth is right. And I think I know how to start lifting our light higher." She opened her laptop, showing them a group chat she'd created. It included dozens of seniors from their Wi-Fi installation project. "I've been asking if anyone has security cameras, dash cams, or flood monitoring equipment that might have caught anything the night of Ms. Cruz's accident." Jack straightened. "Maya," the lawyer said. "They said we couldn't make public statements," Maya interrupted. "This isn't public. This is just neighbors, helping neighbors find the truth." Pastor Ruth smiled proudly. "Out of the mouths of babes." Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard as she explained, "Mr. Peterson on River Street has a weather station that records rainfall and water levels. Mrs. Rodriguez's new doorbell camera faces the road. And get this, Mr. Harrison, you know, the retired ham radio operator?" Jack nodded. Everyone knew Bill Harrison, who'd been monitoring the airwaves from his attic setup for decades. He logged some weird telemetry signals that night. He says they didn't match any normal vehicle or emergency frequencies. As if on cue, Maya's laptop chimed with a new message. "Look, Mrs. Chen's grandson found footage from her security camera. It shows your truck arriving at the river after Elena's car went in, not before like that fake video claimed." Jack leaned forward, hope flickering in his chest for the first time in days. More messages were popping up in the group chat. Seniors he and Maya had helped connect to their families were now connecting to help them. Martha's sharing her dashcam video from when she drove home from bingo that night, Maya read excitedly, and the Johnsons' flood monitoring camera caught the whole thing from their marina. Pastor Ruth watched them with satisfaction. "See? Light calls to light. These folks remember who helped them when they felt forgotten. Now they're returning the favor." Jack watched his daughter work, her face illuminated by the screen's glow as she coordinated with their impromptu investigation team. She'd organized the seniors into groups, each checking different types of recordings and data from that stormy night. Mr. Harrison sent detailed logs of the strange signals he'd picked up, technical data that might prove someone had remotely interfered with Elena's car. Mrs. Rodriguez's doorbell camera had caught Greg Hanlon's car driving through town hours before the accident, contradicting his claim that he'd been in Cincinnati that day. As the evening wore on, Pastor Ruth left them with the remainder of the banana bread and a reminder, sometimes the brightest light comes from the most unexpected places. Don't underestimate the power of a community that knows the truth in its heart. Jack sat with Maya late into the night, watching as she pieced together their neighbor's digital breadcrumbs. Her fingers moved steadily over the keyboard, each click and tap a small act of defiance against the lies that had threatened to drown them. The wall clock ticked past midnight. Maya's eyes were tired but determined as she organized another folder of evidence. Jack felt something stir in his chest, not quite hope yet, but its precursor, determination. The same feeling he'd had in the army when facing impossible odds, the same steel in his spine that had sent him into that flooded river without hesitation. Looking at his daughter, still fighting when he'd been ready to give up, Jack remembered what Elena had said about progress coming from unexpected places. Sometimes it took a teenager with a laptop and a group of tech-savvy seniors to remind him that truth, like light, found its way through even the darkest storms. "Maya," he said softly, "it's late. You should get some sleep." She shook her head, adding another file to her growing collection of evidence. "Just a little longer, Dad. Mr. Harrison is sending more signal data," and Mrs. Chen found another camera angle. Jack watched her work, feeling that spark of determination grow stronger. The town that had turned against them was also the town that was helping them fight back, one security camera, one dashcam, one ham radio log at a time. By Wednesday morning, Jack's kitchen had transformed into an unlikely command center. Elderly neighbors shuffled in and out, bringing USB drives, old VHS tapes, and printouts of security logs. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived with her famous tamales, insisting everyone needed to keep their strength up while they worked. Maya sat at the center of it all, her laptop surrounded by a growing collection of external hard drives, Mr. Harrison, the ham radio enthusiast, hunched beside her with pages of handwritten frequency logs, his thick glasses pushed up on his forehead. "Look here," he said, pointing to a series of numbers. These signals weren't just random interference. They followed a pattern, the same pattern, every few minutes, right before the crash. Maya nodded, correlating the timestamps with other pieces of evidence. And Mrs. Chen's security footage shows Greg's car parked near the river road for 20 minutes that afternoon. He claimed he was in Cincinnati, but the timestamp proves he was here. Jack watched from the counter, amazed at how his daughter had mobilized Riverbend seniors into a digital detective force. Mr. Peterson, who'd initially been suspicious of their Wi-Fi project, was now enthusiastically sharing data from his weather station. "The water levels that night," Mr. Peterson explained, spreading charts across the table, "they weren't high enough to naturally sweep a car off the road, not at that spot. Something else had to cause it." The doorbell rang, and Jack opened it to find Victor Cruz standing there, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Maya called me," he said quietly. "Said you needed someone who remembered the old days at the plant." Jack welcomed him in, noting how Victor's eyes lingered on the factory logo, still hanging on the wall. The older man settled into a kitchen chair, his weathered hands clasped tightly. "What they're doing to Elena and you," Victor said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's not so different from what happened back then. Quiet whispers, subtle accusations, making good people look wrong in the eyes of their neighbors." The kitchen fell silent as Victor spoke. Even Maya stopped typing. "I was the best machinist they had," he continued. "But every time a promotion came up, there was always some reason why I wasn't quite right for it. Too aggressive if I spoke up, not assertive enough if I stayed quiet." He looked at Jack. "Elena left town because she couldn't stand watching it happen. We fought about it. I wanted to keep my head down. She wanted to fight. Now I think maybe she was right." Mr. Harrison nodded slowly. "I remember those days, Victor. Never sat right with me, but I didn't speak up either." "Maybe it's time we all did," Maya's laptop chimed. "Got it!" she exclaimed. "The service records from Greg's shell company. They installed the same remote access modules in their entire fleet, including Elena's car. The serial numbers match." Jack leaned over her shoulder, reading the technical specifications. The evidence was clear. Greg's vendor had created a backdoor into Elena's vehicle systems, allowing remote manipulation of critical functions. The sound of boots on the porch announced Sheriff Briggs's arrival. He'd been skeptical at first, but the mounting evidence had changed his stance. The sheriff reviewed the documentation spread across the kitchen table, his expression growing grimmer with each page. "This is more than corporate sabotage," he said finally. "This is attempted murder. Greg Hanlon didn't just try to ruin reputations, he put lives at risk." Victor stood up straighter. "I'll testify," he announced. "About the past, about the pattern. Sometimes old wounds need to be opened again to heal properly." The sheriff nodded, gathering the most crucial documents. "I'm calling a press conference this afternoon. The people of Riverbend deserve to know the truth, all of it." As the group dispersed, each carrying assignments for final evidence gathering, Jack's phone rang. Elena's name lit up the screen. "Turn on your local news," she said when he answered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Sheriff Briggs is making a statement." Jack flipped on the small TV in the corner. The sheriff stood at a podium, his usual stoic expression replaced by one of clear conviction. "Based on substantial evidence gathered by community members," Briggs announced, "we are opening a formal investigation into Gregory Hanlon for attempted murder, corporate sabotage, and fraud. The footage suggesting Jack Dawson staged the rescue has been proven doctored. Mr. Dawson's actions that night were nothing short of heroic." Maya squeezed her father's hand as they watched. Over the phone, they could hear Elena's shaky breathing. "We can win this," Elena said, her voice breaking. "The board is reviewing everything right now. Greg's house of cards is falling apart. Jack closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the past weeks beginning to lift. "It's not just about winning anymore," he said softly. "It's about setting things right, past and present." Through the kitchen window he could see Mr. Harrison and Victor walking slowly down the driveway, deep in conversation. Mrs. Rodriguez was distributing the last of her tamales to departing seniors. Maya's laptop continued to ping with incoming messages from their improvised investigation team. "Your father's here," Jack told Elena. "He's been incredible." There was a pause on the line. "Tell him." Elena's voice caught. "Tell him I'm proud to be his daughter." The morning sun streamed through the windows of Jack's kitchen as Elena paced, her laptop open on the counter. Maya had helped her set up for the virtual board meeting, making sure the lighting and background looked professional. Jack stood nearby, offering silent support as the clock ticked toward 9. "You've got this," he said quietly, sliding a cup of coffee toward her. Elena managed a tight smile, smoothing her blazer. 20 years in business, and this might be the most important presentation of my life." The laptop chimed with the incoming video call. Elena took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and clicked to join. The screen filled with faces, the 12 members of Nova Bridge's board of directors, along with the company's legal team. Greg Hanlon's face appeared in one of the squares, looking smug until he noticed the determined set of Elena's jaw. "Thank you all for meeting on short notice," Elena began, her voice steady. "I have evidence that will reveal the truth about my accident and the subsequent attempts to damage both my reputation and the company's integrity." Over the next hour, Elena methodically presented the evidence Maya and the seniors had gathered. She showed the tampered car logs, the shell company documents, and the security footage, placing Greg near the scene. Mr. Harrison's radio logs and Mr. Peterson's weather data painted a clear picture of deliberate sabotage. The board members' expressions grew increasingly grave. Greg's face had lost all color. "Furthermore," Elena continued, "I have testimony about a pattern of discriminatory practices that Mr. Hanlon has perpetuated within our company, mirroring historical injustices in communities like Riverbend." She played a clip of Victor's statement, his dignified words landing with quiet force. Several board members nodded slowly, taking notes. "Mr. Hanlon," the board chairman said, "do you have any response to these allegations?" Greg's attempted defense crumbled as the company's legal team presented additional findings from their own investigation. Within minutes, the board called for a vote. The motion to remove Gregory Hanlon from his position as Chief Financial Officer passes unanimously, the chairman announced. "Ms. Cruz, we owe you an apology for the disruption to your leadership. We vote now to reinstate you as CEO, effective immediately." The vote was quick and decisive. On a separate screen, Jack and Maya watched as 2 police officers entered Greg's home office, leading him away in handcuffs. Elena's voice was clear and strong as she outlined her vision for Nova Bridge's future. "The Riverbend Innovation Pilot isn't just about one town," she explained. "It's a model for how technology companies can partner with rural communities, creating opportunities for seniors, veterans, and young people who've been left behind by the digital divide." The board's enthusiasm grew as she detailed the program's potential return on investment. By the time she finished, they had approved an expanded budget that would make Riverbend the flagship for a nationwide initiative. When the meeting ended, Elena closed her laptop and let out a long breath. Jack pulled her into a tight hug, and Maya bounced excitedly. "We did it!" Maya exclaimed. "When can we start?" Elena laughed, wiping away tears. "How about right now? Jack, will you be my plant director?" Jack pretended to consider it, though his smile gave him away. "Well, I suppose someone needs to keep an eye on things." They drove to the old factory, where Victor was already waiting. The massive building stood silent, its brick walls weathered by decades of neglect. But now, looking at it through new eyes, they could see its potential. "Your fellowship program will be based in the East Wing," Elena told Maya, pointing to a row of tall windows. "We'll outfit it with the latest equipment, everything you need to train other young people in coding and network administration." Maya beamed, already sketching ideas on her tablet. "The main floor will be perfect for the refurbishment operation," Jack added, his experience with machinery evident in his assessment. "We can set up assembly lines here, testing stations there. Veterans will feel right at home with the structured workflow." Victor walked slowly along the building's facade, trailing his hand along the familiar bricks. "Never thought I'd see this place come alive again," he said softly. They stood together, watching the setting sun paint the dusty windows with golden light. The factory's long shadow stretched across the parking lot like a promise of things to come. "Tomorrow," Elena said, "we'll start bringing in the cleaning crews. By next month, we'll have the first production line ready for training." Jack wrapped an arm around Maya's shoulders, remembering all the times they'd driven past this empty building, symbol of their town's decline. Now it would be the heart of Riverbend's revival. Victor turned to Elena, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Your mother would have been proud," he said quietly. "She always said you'd do great things." The sun's rays caught the windows just right, making them gleam like new. For a moment they could all see it. The bustling corridors, the hum of machinery, the mixing of voices young and old, as knowledge flowed both ways between generations. Not just a factory reborn, but a community renewed. Maya took out her phone and snapped a picture of the four of them with the glowing building behind them. "For the history books," she said with a grin. "The day everything changed." They stood there together, watching the golden light play across the factory's face, each lost in thoughts of the future taking shape before them. The past's wounds were finally healing, making way for something new and hopeful to grow in their place. The autumn breeze carried the sound of voices and music across the factory parking lot, now freshly paved and lined with cars. The old brick building, scrubbed clean and fitted with new windows, stood proud against the clear blue sky. A stage had been set up near the main entrance, decorated with red, white, and blue bunting for the dedication ceremony. The restored factory bell, polished until it gleamed, hung in its tower above the entrance. One by one, newly hired workers approached to ring it, each tone celebrating a fresh start. Martha Jenkins, 72 and now trained in quality control, pulled the rope with surprising strength. The clear note rang out over the crowd. "That's for my granddaughter's college fund," she announced with pride. Next came Tom Wilson, a veteran who'd served with Jack in logistics. His ring was followed by a quiet hooah that brought smiles to the other vets in the crowd. The bell's song continued as more workers took their turns, each ring carrying its own story of renewal. The high school choir, positioned on the steps, began singing "Amazing Grace," their young voices floating over the assembled crowd. Maya stood among them, her voice joining the harmony while her eyes kept darting proudly to the East Wing where her coding fellowship program was housed. Sheriff Walt Briggs made his way to the podium, his usually confident stride more measured today. He cleared his throat, adjusted his tie, and faced the crowd. "I owe this community, and especially Jack Dawson, an apology," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the hushed gathering. "6 months ago, when false accusations were flying, I let caution override justice. I listened to whispers instead of looking at facts. Jack has always been a man of honor, and I should have stood by him." Jack, standing near the stage, nodded in acceptance as the sheriff continued. "This town is stronger when we trust each other, when we look past differences and see the truth in people's hearts. I'm proud to say that Riverbend's finest will be taking cybersecurity training right here, learning from both our senior citizens and our youth." Applause rippled through the crowd as the sheriff stepped down. Elena moved to the podium next, her professional attire softened by the warm smile she wore. "Before we cut the ribbon, I'd like to invite someone special to join me," she said, extending her hand toward the front row. "Dad?" Victor Cruz stood slowly, his weathered face breaking into a smile. He walked up the steps, pausing to squeeze Jack's shoulder as he passed. Father and daughter stood together, holding the ceremonial scissors. 40 years ago, I worked in this factory, Victor said, his voice thick with emotion. Today my daughter and I open its doors again, not just to jobs, but to dreams, to dignity, to the future. Together they cut the red ribbon. Cheers erupted as it fell, and the choir launched into a joyful rendition of "Lean on Me." The celebration moved to the parking lot, where tables had been set up under strings of lanterns. The potluck spread was pure Riverbend, casseroles, pies, and Pastor Ruth's famous fried chicken. The scent of home cooking mingled with the crisp autumn air. Maya had set up a demonstration area near the food tables, showing off the latest version of her Wi-Fi mesh network. Mrs. Henderson, who hadn't left her house in months due to arthritis, appeared on the large screen via the new telehealth module. "I can talk to my doctor without having to climb those stairs at his office," Mrs. Henderson explained to the gathered crowd. "And Maya's team helped me set up virtual bingo nights with the senior center." The screen showed crystal-clear video, a far cry from the stuttering connection Maya had struggled with on her old laptop. Several homebound seniors had already signed up for the program, eager to stay connected with their community. Victor found himself surrounded by former coworkers, sharing stories of the old days while marveling at the new technology their grandchildren were learning to use. Elena watched from a distance, her heart full at seeing her father so at ease. Jack brought her a plate of food, loading it with samples of every dish. "You've got to try Miss Betty's apple crisp," he insisted. "It's legendary in these parts." They sat together at one of the tables, watching their town come alive around them. Children played tag between the tables, while their parents chatted with new coworkers. Young tech trainers sat with retired factory workers, sketching diagrams on napkins and sharing laughs. The sun began to set, and the lanterns twinkled to life overhead. The factory windows glowed warmly from within, where third-shift training was already underway. Music drifted from a portable speaker. Someone had started playing slow songs. Sheriff Briggs stopped by their table, tipping his hat. "Just got word that Greg Hanlon took a plea deal," he said quietly. "He'll be making restitution to the company and doing community service, ironically, teaching business ethics at the state prison." Elena nodded, satisfied that justice had been served without bitterness. "Sometimes the best revenge is success," she said, watching another group of workers ring the bell. The autumn air grew cooler as evening settled in. Jack and Elena stood on the factory steps, their hands naturally finding each other. Below them, the potluck continued in full swing. Maya was teaching a group of seniors how to take selfies, while Victor led an impromptu dance lesson for some of the younger workers. The old factory, so long a symbol of what Riverbend had lost, now pulsed with new life. Its windows glowed like warm hearths in the twilight, each one representing a story of renewal, not just for Jack and Elena, but for an entire community that had refused to let hope die. "Look at that," Jack said softly, squeezing Elena's hand as they watched the scene before them. "Who would have thought a storm could lead to all this?" Elena leaned her head against his shoulder, remembering that rain-soaked night that had changed everything. The factory bell rang out once more, its clear tone carrying across the town like a promise kept. If you enjoyed the story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.